something, actually. Sorry about that, guys. I just realised, actually, I'm having a terrible time with this. I literally get this sorted out, and now you guys can probably hear me, so I do apologise for those of you wondering what we were talking about. So I'm going to start again, if that's all right with you guys. Sorry about this. So welcome along to the review of the 2022 British Grand Prix. Of course, for those of you who aren't very good at lip reading, let me sort of bring us back up to speed. It was an incredible performance and a great drive from Carlos Sainz. Sorry, guys, can you still hear us? Let us know in the chat, because on the stream, it's saying, you can hear me now. Brilliant. Sorry about that. Right, where were we? Yes, British Grand Prix. Carlos Sainz wins his maiden race for Formula One, for Ferrari for Formula 1. We'll get there in the end. Anyway, Lee, sum up your thoughts of this race. I'm having an absolute mare with this intro. What are your thoughts on the British Grand Prix? What a race.
It's okay, Adam, don't worry. But yeah, my first thoughts was, vamos Carlos, vamos. But beyond that, it was just a crazy race. It's just a simple one-word crazy. It was enjoyable up and down the grid. It was action galore. Overtakes, racing, and it's just what we wanted to see from these rule regulations in 2022.
Yeah, absolutely. And
minus the crashing, obviously.
Yeah, of course. I mean, it tells a very small portion of an otherwise incredible Grand Prix. But of course, before we get into that, just to remind you guys, now that you can hear us, of course, that we are the independent F1 podcast made by the fans and for the fans, as we bring you race reviews, previews, and all of the latest news, talking points, and gossip in the world of Formula One for your listening and viewing pleasure, of course, when you can hear us. Now, Lee, of course, we've already talked about Carlos Sainz winning the race and how it only tells a fraction of an otherwise incredible race. But if you can, how significant could this performance be for Carlos Sainz? Because I want to focus on him and give him the respect that he's due on this one. How important was that result for him? And his 150th Grand Prix, first pole position of his career that he achieved yesterday as well. So to sum that all up and manage to secure that result with a win, and also in a big win for Ferrari, it's got to be a huge confidence booster for Carlos.
I mean, it's for two reasons. It's going to be a very big thing for him. Firstly, you think about where he was earlier in the season, and we're like, Carlos kept crashing. He's almost in the same bracket as Latifi and Stroll in the amount of regularity of crashing on gravel traps, as Carlos did like a good gravel trap. And he just couldn't get it to one with the car and find the sweet spot that Charles was finding. But in the last few races, he's slowly built his confidence. He's got podium results. He's been runner-up. And now the next, obviously, step from the finishing P2 is obviously the P1 and winning the Grand Prix. And he's now reached that improvement curve for this year. And it's like he's got to one with the car. He may not have the overall speed that Charles can show, but he's reached that point. So now he knows he can do it, which leads on to the second point of 150 races. You're a driver, you're playing on your mind. I haven't won a race yet. When I'm going to race, I want to be world champion. When I'm going to race, and it's 150 and it's happened. So now it's happened. It's gone. His confidence can now improve, and as the rest of the season goes, I wouldn't be surprised if we see more race wins from Carlos.
Yeah, I certainly hope so. And I think, you know what, there have been times in Carlos's career, particularly at Ferrari, where he's put together some great performances and not quite got the fortune that he's needed to get over the line and get that race win. Today, whilst he did drive well and definitely deserved to get the result in the end by his performance, it was far from a perfect performance. I mean, we had the early start, obviously the first start that we had. He was slow off the line. He got passed by Max Verstappen, and of course we had the huge crash, which we'll talk about in a little bit later on. But you know, he obviously had that bit of fortune. Then he had the second start. It wasn't the best start, but he just about managed to keep Max Verstappen behind him. And then obviously as the stint progressed on, Max was still getting closer and closer and closer, and then he made that error which allowed Max back through. And then it just seemed after that he just, if anything, he didn't have the pace to win, and his teammate was faster than him. Obviously, when Max obviously had his own issue, fell back further down, it just felt like it was going to be one of those days where Carlos just couldn't put it together, and it just wasn't able to extract the performance that we know he can. But then the race came to him after that safety car. He was able to put on those soft tyres, despite the fact that Ferrari probably should have pitted his teammate. Didn't matter. He managed to get those tyres on, got past his teammate with a relative amount of difficulty from Leclerc, and then obviously just pressed on and got the result. It just felt that despite everything that was going on around him, everything had to fall in place for him today to get that result. And fortunately for his sake, it did. So in your mind, Lee, will that really matter to him ultimately? Because a lot of people, as I said already, and just broke it down, that this is not his best performance, but at this point, it's a race win, and that's kind of the most important thing.
No, it's not going to matter to him and the circumstances of winning. It's a race win. That's it. He's got that psychological tick box ticked. He can now focus on more race wins and obviously the championship at large, which is obviously going to be his end goal.
Yeah, absolutely right. And obviously, you know, now he's in a position in the championship where it's still hard to say if he's definitely in it, but he's only now 11 points behind his teammates. So you'd almost feel that if Ferrari, in some people's opinion, should have established team orders today, and they didn't really do that, if anything, they kind of went against it, they probably in a position now where they can't really afford to hold Sainz back now, because he's managed to get himself back in this, at least as far as his teammate is concerned.
Oh yeah, all right, 11 points isn't equal points, but considering how far behind he was earlier in the season, he's right back there in near enough equal terms. And right, it's on Ferrari, and obviously I'm surprised that they allowed them to race, but it's just a nice surprise that they did allow the race. Because just comparing to Red Bull in Barcelona, was it Barcelona where they ordered Sergio?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Where it was early in the season, and Sergio, they ordered obviously for Max to go past. And back then there was probably less of a difference between Max and Sergio than there was Charles and Carlos. So I'm very surprised, but yeah, it was nice to see them race. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. It was quite interesting because I was sitting there watching it and I'm thinking, look, Ferrari have got to let Leclerc pass. They've got to do something, because we had a very strange race. Of course, you know, we can break it down. Obviously, Red Bull were unfortunate. Perez got some damage with that early incident with Leclerc. Leclerc was able to keep on going, and he was driving remarkably well under the circumstances. But you had how can I put this? You had a resurgent Lewis Hamilton in the Mercedes, and he was looking mega quick in front of a home crowd. He was a real threat today. And of course, we'll get into his race a little bit later on. But it just felt at a point that Ferrari were once again being hesitant on team orders or telling their drivers to fight. They were sort of like, oh, let's wait and see how things play out. And I'm sitting there thinking, look, Ferrari are kind of messing around with this and sort of waiting for something to happen. But if they wait too long, it felt to me that they could lose this race to Hamilton. You know, he was that good today. So with all that going on, Lee, what were you thinking? Did you think Ferrari just needed to put that team order and say to Carlos, look, you're not driving quick enough. Leclerc needs to overtake you. He's faster than you, despite having a damaged car. Or do you think they should have just said, look, guys, just race. Sort it out amongst yourselves?
Well, I mean, from what I perceive Ferrari as, I'm surprised they didn't do the team orders. Because that's normally, and based on history on how they go about racing, is they use team orders, they have their priority. But as a fan, it was nice to see them race. But I said to you while we were watching the race in our chat, I have faith in Ferrari that they can mess it up, and they nearly did. So
yeah.
We could easily have been talking about how Ferrari lost this race because Sergio won it or Lewis won it.
Yeah.
And there's like, Ferrari have done it again. They've lost the race. So that's how close they came to losing the race.
Well, that's what I kind of want to draw you to. I'm just looking at the comments now just to see what you guys, now that you can hear us, I have to say about this one. I've got Chris Welch in there saying that Carlos, obviously, you know, is happy for Sainz, finally a race winner, and happy to see Mick scoring points. And of course, that was a really good story as well. Really happy about that one. The one race I didn't predict Mick to score points, and he goes and does it. So take from that what you will. Also says Ferrari team orders still need working on. MotoGP Adam, hi Adam, hope you're doing okay in the chat. Says, to be honest though, Leclerc's probs should have let him pass. Shiro, hi Shiro, hope you're doing okay. Saying 100% agree with Chris's comments on Ferrari. And hello to the rest of you that have joined in the chat as well and are watching this podcast review live stream. Of course, if you are new, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And if you're listening to us on your favourite podcasting platform a little bit later on, then don't forget to give us a nice review, of course. Although I should stress, only 5-star reviews that get a shout out on this show. You have to send us a screenshot if you're listening to Spotify or any other podcast that doesn't allow you to leave a written review. I do apologise for that one. Anyway, look, plugging aside, let's move on to Charles Leclerc, because I'll be honest with you, Lee, You know, obviously, from we're talking to each other in the DNF1 group chat as this race is going on, obviously yourself, myself and Courtney, and I cannot imagine a race where I've said so many different things about how Ferrari are very, very lucky that they have someone like Charles Leclerc in their car right now. And, you know, we saw some footage after the race of Mattia Binotto talking to a distraught Charles, who obviously was almost inconsolable about how the race panned out for him today. And he was literally giving him sort of the, not the hairdryer treatment, but reminding him not to criticise the team. And bear in mind, this is a guy, for the last few races, that has had different problems with Ferrari, whether it be reliability or strategy mistakes from the team. He's been driving incredibly well, and he's lost races out of his control that his team have cost him. So with that in mind, whilst I totally understand what Mattia Binotto is trying to say, can you blame Charles if he just wanted to let loose and just say, look, I'm doing everything. I've defended this team. I'm driving my heart and soul out of this car. And despite everything, the team are letting me down.
No, you can't blame Charles in that sense. And on the same line of, can you blame Sebastian for leaving? Can you blame Fernando for leaving?
Well, no, absolutely.
Yeah,
and for the same
they're
thing,
providing the same treatment to Charles that Fernando and Sebastian received at their respective times there. And obviously that rose to the frustration on why Fernando decided to leave. Sebastian was sort of kicked out. So,
yeah.
But yeah, I completely understand Charles's frustration there.
But, I mean, Ferrari got the result today. They won the race. Carlos Sainz won the race. And that is the most important thing, we should take away from this. But this was a great opportunity because of Perez's incident at the start of the race, which, of course, we can talk about that in a minute. And Max Verstappen's misfortune for once, as brilliant as Max has been, obviously, a bit of reliability issue there, which we'll talk about later on. It gave Ferrari almost a bit of an open goal to try and get a 1-2 at Silverstone. Yes, of course, Lewis Hamilton was brilliant today. But I just felt the pace that the Ferraris had, especially Leclerc, driving a damaged car as well. We shouldn't forget, they kept talking about the 5 points of downforce that he was not getting from this car. It just felt like Ferrari just needed to do what they needed to do. And when, of course, that safety car came out, before it came out, I was saying in the group that I thought Leclerc had the race won. There was a risk that Hamilton was going to play himself back in with fresher tyres, but Ferrari did make that move to allow Leclerc through, and Leclerc just left his teammate. It would almost felt to me that Sainz was fighting Hamilton for second and Leclerc was going to win the race. But then the safety car came out. It made sense to pit them both on soft tyres and perhaps double stack. Ferrari didn't pit Leclerc. They told him to stay out and they pitted Carlos. And the rationale behind that, Binotto was saying that, and this is a quote from Binotto, by the way, for those of you listening, saying that there is nothing to sort out in the team. We understood Charles' disappointment, but he did a fantastic race with great race pace and defending. It's important to stay calm and focused. We thought a double pit stop was impossible, so we had to make a choice. We chose Carlos because Charles was ahead and his tyres were fresher. We hoped the softs would degrade, but quickly not. For me, I do not accept that as a valid reason to not pit Charles Leclerc. I get it, they want to defend from Hamilton, but in my mind, Ferrari, there was enough of a gap to try a quick double stack, and even if it wasn't that good and Sainz lost a little bit of time, at very worst, he's behind Lewis. And he has the tyres and the car to get past Lewis again anyway. So what were your thoughts on that one? Did you agree with that, or do you feel that Ferrari made the right call?
I don't think Ferrari made the right call. I think it was a 9-second gap between Charles and Carlos when it came to
they were safety car speed as well, weren't they? So it would have been even larger. Yeah.
So they obviously on the graphics that come up on when you're watching the race, it obviously says that under a safety car, the pit stop time loss at Silverstone is 9 seconds. So the gap, and that's in and out the pit lane. So the gap between Carlos and Charles was 9 seconds. I don't think they would have had any problem with a double stack unless Charles had an absolute nightmare of a pit stop and they couldn't get a tire on or off, and then there would be no problem. Yes, but on a normal pit stop, they would have had enough time to double stack. I don't understand the logic why they didn't. I think it's more they didn't think quick enough, which is not a surprise because Ferrari aren't operationally sharp as, say, Red Bull. But yeah, it's just a missed opportunity for Charles.
Yeah, I now that I think about it, I feel that Ferrari were trying to split the strategy. And I think the logic behind it is I think they dangled a carrot to Lewis Hamilton to follow Charles and stay on the same tyres as Charles, so that's at the very least Sainz could attack Hamilton and maybe Ferrari could just have a 1-2 with Sainz protecting Leclerc. And it didn't happen. Hamilton followed Sainz in. And to be honest, it made sense for Mercedes to do that, really, because even if Lewis had stayed out, the Ferraris would have been on fresher tyres, they would have been on softer tyres and gotten him anyway. So Lewis's only chance was to gamble on a pit stop. And ultimately, you could say it worked out for him to a degree, but lost the place to Perez. That can happen. But it made no sense to leave Lewis out. So I feel like Ferrari gambled on that and they just got it horribly wrong when they saw Lewis following Carlos in the pits. And now they're trying to sort of dress it as if like, oh no, this was the plan all along. We thought Leclerc could manage it. I mean, to be fair, Leclerc did an incredible job to get fourth. You know, he was very unlucky to get passed by Perez. Obviously, that incident with Perez, the racing quality from those guys was incredible at the end. It was absolutely incredible. And you had the British crowd really getting off their seats. They were really treated, you know, some of the genius of Lewis's driving. The move with Lewis and Leclerc at Copse. Bear in mind, guys, Leclerc is on 20 laps older hard tyres and Lewis has got 2 compounds softer. And Leclerc had a damaged front wing from an incident with Perez. And he still managed to complete an overtake round the outside of Copse with Lewis alongside him on the inside. I mean, I don't want to be melodramatic here, guys, but I literally saw that with Leclerc on board and I'm expecting Hamilton to go into the side of him just from a mistake or something like what happened with Verstappen last season. Not implying that Lewis was at fault or anything like that, but it was just absolutely incredible driving. Some of the best pieces of driving I've seen in a long, long time between those guys. And it just shows how good Leclerc is at the moment. He drove a car that was practically damaged like Perez is for the whole race. And on raw pace, if it weren't for the safety car, he'd have won today. And Ferrari again and again and again. And it frustrates me, and maybe I'm having a bit of a rant as a Ferrari fan here, but it really frustrates me that Ferrari, over and over again, when they're in this position where they just need to capitalise on the fortune and the pace that they have, and once again, they find newer ways to mess things up. And right now, we look at the bigger picture, Lee. Carlos Sainz won his first Grand Prix. Fantastic. Deserved to win a Grand Prix. I'm really, really happy for him. And I'm glad that, you know, I should be delighted that Ferrari won today. I really should. But I look at the bigger picture and I see Max Verstappen now only lost 6 points to Leclerc today because of what Ferrari did to his race and the fact that they just didn't manage it well enough, where it should have been a lot more. When you look back on this championship, whether Charles Leclerc goes on to turn it around and win it or not, if he doesn't, it will be looking at races like this one, the one in Baku, the one in Monaco. Those are going to be the races that he'll say, well, I did my part, but the team just let me down. What are your thoughts on that mini rant, if you like?
Well, I get your point about Charles, but that's presuming that Charles is the main Ferrari title contender. Obviously, as the season goes on, Carlos finished ahead of Charles last year. We could be very in similar position that Carlos finished ahead of Charles this year, and you go, oh, Charles had these missed opportunities, which would be correct. But it's the driver that maximizes it. And if Carlos, for example, starts going on winning races because he's now found this new confidence, and Charles is suffering because he's taken hit after hit from Ferrari, Carlos could be the challenger to Max and Red Bull, and it's like, well, Carlos has maximized those opportunities. So it's really a pivotal moment on the season for Ferrari. It's they need to rebuild Charles's trust in the team, but also obviously maintain that their driver pairing doesn't blow up in a rivalry because they're fighting over who gets to be number one.
Yeah, I mean, I hope it doesn't, you know, for Ferrari's sake. It did feel like it was going to be one of those that might potentially turn into something bad, and you sort of worry that the two of them are going to come together when they're fighting on track, and then Lewis Hamilton just benefits from that. As great as Lewis is, that's what he does best. You know, he capitalizes on that. And I think we should also acknowledge that Sainz, there was a key moment in the race, and I think I'm just looking at the comments now, and Bear Papa has just mentioned this, and I'm really glad that they have, because I want to bring this up as well. They say that the original plan was for Sainz to defend while Leclerc kept the lead with the old tyre. And obviously, you remember that radio call. Ferrari wanted him to back off 10 car lengths to Leclerc on the restart. He wanted to wanted to bunch everybody up. Leclerc just runs off into the distance, and then Sainz has got to defend on the fresh tyres. I mean, Sainz called that out almost after they said it and said, no, don't be stupid. I can't sit and hold these guys back. I need to go after and try to win this race, because otherwise neither of us will win. As it turned out, he made the right call. And it was similar to Monaco as well when they tried to make that call about the tyre strategy and Sainz told them to do something different. They followed that. Turned out that was the best option, at least for him. But it ruined his teammate's race. So Ferrari right now, as crazy as it sounds, they have a good car right now. They had a great opportunity to get a 1-2 today. All right, some things didn't play out the way that they would have wanted them to. But it feels like maybe Leclerc needs to do what Carlos Sainz is doing and just calling the shots from the seat of his own car in the same way Vettel did all those years ago in that, because Ferrari right now just don't seem to be able to make that right call when they have to.
Oh yeah, I mean, I was just thinking of when Sebastian called the shots. Back then, Ferrari were really operationally poor on the pit wall, and I still think that's one of the weak areas to this day is their operations on the pit wall. And you can say what you want between differences between Carlos and Charles about speed and performance, but I think it's very clear that Carlos is a lot better at thinking on the feet and the situation of the race and about how it can benefit him compared to where Charles may be the outright have the pace, but I don't think he has the quite the capacity yet to think about the greater picture and the plans and what could benefit him from a personal strategy to the likes of what Carlos did today.
Yeah, absolutely right. Guys, of course, let us know your thoughts on the race today for Ferrari. Of course, if you agree with what we say or if you've got any other alternate opinions as well. I mean, MotoGP Adam saying, can you blame Carlos Lowe? No, absolutely not. I think based on what we saw, Carlos made the right call and that won him the Grand Prix. I think if he'd have stayed behind to try and protect his teammate, I think there's a good chance that Hamilton or Perez might have got him on the restart, and then they may have got Leclerc and won the Grand Prix as well. That's something you didn't want to do. So, no, I think.
And I also want to add, Adam, that any respected racing driver who has a sniff of their first Grand Prix win, they go, "Yeah, okay, I'll sit back and protect my teammate."
Absolutely.
No, I want my first win.
No, absolutely. You're not going to expect them to sort of hold back and play second fiddle. I mean, if I was in Carlos's shoes, I'd have done the exact same thing. You present it with that chance because you don't know when the next one's going to come. If it ever comes, you know, it is what it is. So, but let us know your thoughts on that one, guys. We should move on because we talked about Ferrari quite a lot today. Let's talk about the start of the race. Very strange one. It was a very difficult one, obviously, watching replays of that one. Fortunately, from what we understand, everybody is okay. We saw Zhou and Albon obviously taken to the medical centre for checks. Zhou looked okay, or, you know, Zhou Guan Yu looked okay. Albon, from what I've been hearing, he's okay, but it was just precautionary as well, so that's good. But, yeah, very strange start. We saw a lot of cars crashing going into turn one, and it was a moment really where you can't really lay any sort of blame. Not that I'm looking to lay any blame to anyone, but we had George Russell, Zhou, and Gasly, and there was a gap open for Gasly, just as George Russell was looking in the mirror on his left to see where Gasly was. He didn't think Gasly was coming. Then Gasly, all of a sudden out of nowhere, manages to find a spot in the gap, but at that point, Russell's already turning in, and obviously Gasly tries to back out. Russell gets clipped by that, goes into Zhou, and then obviously the carnage ensues, and Zhou ends up going flying over the barrier and into the fence. Fortunately, everyone was okay and no one was hurt, but that was a really scary one, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, two thoughts came to my mind when we saw that incident. Was similar, right? It didn't fly, but it reminded me a bit of Mark Webber in Valencia when Mark took the car to the skies. I think he got confused between an airplane and a Formula One car. That incident, if you recall the one I'm talking about. But also, it just that moment of similar to the thoughts what happened with Roman Grosjean last year. Is this another Jules Bianchi moment in recent Formula One history? Have I just seen something I didn't obviously want to watch of a driver dying at doing what they do, but thankfully that wasn't the case. But that moment, obviously, that thought does cross the mind when you see a big accident like that. And thankfully, the Halo did its job.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it is a testament to how far Formula One cars have gone in terms of safety and how far they've progressed, that Zhou, despite such a difficult crash, and when we saw the replay, I mean, that would have been absolutely terrifying. If you're Zhou, imagine in that position, obviously you're skidding along on the top. You can't see anything because it's all dark under there because all the light's being blocked by the top end of your car because it's much wider than the top. And obviously you're skidding across the gravel. It sends the car up flying over the barrier. You don't know where you are. You don't know what's going on. You just know you're flying at a high speed and you just hope it stops and you hope you're going to be okay. So to see him seeming rather chipper afterwards. Okay, physically unharmed, even if mentally he's a little bit, hurt by that one. I can totally understand it. So it's fantastic to see that he was able to walk away from that one okay. And I think it's a stark reminder as to how dangerous Formula One racing can be. So, yeah, it's really glad to see that it was okay. I'm not going to try and play the blame game on this one, Lee, but do you think the stewards will really look into that one? Because to me, it just looked like one of those things that can happen on the start, and it was just very unfortunate. I don't really feel like I could blame anyone, not that I would want to.
No, I think that was just a simple racing incident that just had, unfortunately, a big dire result, but it was just a racing incident.
I mean, it was much different to another difficult incident that we saw today where Roy Nissany and Dennis Hauger had a bit of a collision in the F2 race, which sent Dennis Hauger over one of the sausage curbs and crashing into the halo of Roy Nissany. An incident where if it wasn't for the halo, Roy Nissany may not have lived to tell the tale. Obviously, we're grateful for the fact that these safety measures have improved so much, but that one was a bit different. I think we look at sausage curbs, and I hate sausage curbs. I think they cause so many unnecessary accidents, and I don't think they should be in Formula One at all, or in any racing whatsoever. But for some reason, the FIA don't seem to agree with that one. And I think in that incident, Roy Nissany, quite rightly, his driving standards in that incident were very, very dangerous as well. So not to draw comparisons, but it's one of those where I feel like you have to look at those incidents and, at the very, very least, acknowledge how great the safety measures have improved in the sport. But that's obviously one thing we did want to talk about. George Russell, obviously, he was complaining that he couldn't restart the race because he got out of his car after the red flag, and he didn't take the car back to the pits. Obviously, it was put on a truck and brought back. Did you agree with that decision? Because it was a bit of a strange one, wasn't it? Because we saw last year Perez, didn't he, in Spa, and he crashed on the way to the grid, and he was allowed to rejoin the race. But George Russell, the race had already started. But he claimed in his interview afterwards that he was just trying to do the noble thing or the right thing to do. And that was just to check that Zhou and Albon were okay. But then obviously by the time he got back to his car, it wouldn't start and it was gone. So what were your thoughts on that one?
I mean, it is very much a hard one. I understand obviously the written rules, and George couldn't start his car. It may be a different story if George got back to his car and the car started and off he go. He probably would have been fine. But the fact that it was on the loader and then back to the pit lane, obviously that's a breach of the rules. But I think the FA have to be very careful that they don't discourage drivers doing the right thing, especially in a big accident, doing the humane thing of getting out the car and stopping and checking. It comes to mind with Nicky Lauda. I can't remember the driver that stopped and got out the car to try and when Nicky had his big accident. I can't remember the driver's name. I mean, I'm a bit hazy on those drivers.
It was I was trying to think. Wasn't it Ronnie Peterson?
I think
that got him out. Yeah, I think it was Ronnie Peterson. But, I mean, I might be wrong. I think it was Ronnie Peterson.
But he stopped and obviously, thankfully, it wasn't a big issue. But just look at it this way: if George had stopped and actually helped, and it saved Zhou's life, then you can't race. I mean, it's very harsh penalty. So I think you have to be very careful regarding this, because so when George stopped, he got out the car and he did run to the incident. He didn't just stop and I don't know, kick the car. It's annoying. So yeah, I just think it's a very fine line, and you don't want to be punishing drivers to trying to help a fellow driver.
Yeah, I mean, I totally get that. And Motorsport Magpie just pointed out, Senna getting out for Eric Comas. That was the other incident I was going to mention as well. Another one we got out of the car. I mean, that was in qualifying. So, take what you want from that incident compared to this one. But I totally understand that. And when I was watching the race, I'm thinking, do you know what? How many of us in that situation, worried about your fellow friends or competitors, will do the same thing? I think a lot of us will probably do it. But the FIA and F1, obviously certain rules are in place for a reason. And even though it was a red flag, and I totally understand George where he's coming from, one of the first rules that you'll find in the rule book is that if you're on the racetrack, live on the racetrack, and you leave your car or you get out of your car, that is literally your race over. And in this situation with the red flag, you've got to bring your car back to the pits. And George didn't do that. I don't know if he could have brought that car back anyway, because it was missing a wheel at the rear. So I don't know if he was going to be able to get back in the car. Obviously, it wouldn't start for whatever reason when he tried to get back into it. it's one of those where whilst George did the right thing from a moral perspective, the FIA would look at that rightfully as a safety concern, saying, look, you can't just expect drivers to get out of the car and run onto a live racetrack, even in a red flag situation, for his own health and safety. So whilst I sympathise with George and commend him for the brilliant gesture he did, I totally understand why they said to him, no, you can't come back into the race for the restart. And it was also strange as well, because obviously they restarted from the grid order, and obviously the explanation that they gave on that one made sense as well. You know, a lot of people thought they should restart the race from the order they were in, but they didn't actually pass any timing beams or anything like that to confirm the current order, so they had to restart from their grid order. So very unfortunate for George. A lot of bad luck there, but I can't really argue against the decision from the stewards just on a health and safety ground. Otherwise, you set a precedent, in my opinion, where other drivers may think of doing similar things. I know it sounds silly because you're not expecting that, but you just want to, at the end of the day, these guys just want to make sure that everyone turns up and goes home safely, really. So I can't really argue with that one. But let us know your thoughts in the comments or in the live chat if you're watching us live on Sunday evening. Let's move on to Red Bull. Max Verstappen, Sergio Perez. Max Verstappen, of course, looked the favourite this weekend to win the Grand Prix. He looked the fastest. He was brilliant in the wet weather, although he made that mistake on his final lap, which cost him pole position. And also, let's not forget, in the race, he was looking good. He looked like he was going to get Sainz anyway. Sainz made the mistake, gave Max the lead. Max wasn't exactly scampering away at the front, but then he had the problems where he was complaining about a puncture to one of his rear tyres. And then it was an issue with the axle where he was just losing so much rear grip, which completely ruined his race. But in the end, managed to finish, I believe, what was it, P8 in the end, or P7?
P7.
Yeah, P7, sorry. Had a bit of a tasty battle with Mick Schumacher towards the end of the race as well. But given the circumstances and the fact that Charles Leclerc, arguably Max's biggest rival at the moment, only scored 6 more points than him in a race that he should have won today, I don't think Max Verstappen will be too disappointed looking back on this one, because he hasn't really lost out much.
No, I think Max would be obviously disappointed that he finished where he did instead of winning the race, which looked very likely once he got past Carlos. But I think it's just that it was just a good sort of damage limitation. He has a nice solid lead in the championship, and it's like, well, I've lost a few points, but it's not the end of the world. Here's what it is. I go off and win in Austria.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, you know, Max himself will look back on this race and say, you know, he'll be annoyed that, you know, he had the pace to win today. It looked like if he didn't have his problems, he probably would have done today. But it is what it is. And I think given how his form has been recently, I think he'll look back and think, you know what, it's fine. I didn't lose that much. But he got himself involved in a few little tasty battles today, didn't he, Max Verstappen? And he did get the shoulders out a little bit more than I was expecting. This new calmer, more methodic Max Verstappen. Some of the old aggressive traits tended to come back in, perhaps when he was a little bit more flustered. Obviously, the start of the race, that incident with Leclerc at turn 4, pushed Leclerc quite wide into the runoff. What did you make of that incident? Because I didn't think that was a penalty. I thought that was all a bit fair game. I don't think Leclerc was far enough alongside him to warrant the space around the outside of turn 4.
Yeah, I didn't think that was a penalty.
No. I mean, let us know your thoughts on this one as we go through them, because we are going to go through them quite quickly, guys, because we're aware of time. We don't want to be on this too long, but I thought that was fine. The Mick Schumacher incident towards the end of the race, however, I actually thought that was a little bit naughty. I think Mick Schumacher was a lot further ahead. I think he warranted the space, and Max didn't give him the space. And luckily, Mick Schumacher pulled out, because if he didn't, that would have ended up in an incident. What did you make of that one, Lee?
Yeah, I do actually agree with you there again. I think that should have been a penalty. I think that was uncalled for. But I also do agree with you about Max's angry side came out a bit. I think he was a bit annoyed at how the race turned out. He got a bit flustered, and it was just like, yeah, red mist sort of situation of go ahead. I'm going to do what I can, crash into people if I have to. I'm going to finish this race because just be damn it, sort of thing. So, yeah, I think that was a bit naughty from Max.
Yeah, we are just looking at the chat now. Motorsport Magpie saying Max might get a penalty. Yeah, I mean, of course, yeah, a lot of these things are sort of subject to review at the moment. So, it's as I said, things can change. Of course, we'll just have to wait and see on that one. But of course, at the point that we're recording this live, the results are as they are. Sergio Perez as well also got caught up in a little bit of an incident towards the end of the race as well, and one at the very start. about the damage that he had, he said it was just one of those things where he got squeezed a little bit, or he might have been a bit too close to Charles and his teammate. I'll be honest with you, I watched it a few times, and I originally thought, I think Checo squeezed Charles into turn 3. But in part of me also feels like Leclerc kind of just, thrusted himself into that position as well, which might have caused a bit of damage for Checo. What did you make of that one? It felt like a bit of 6 of one, half a dozen of the other between the two.
Yeah, I think it was both of them. It wasn't one of either of them throwing it down. It was just obviously a mix of the situation between both of them. Obviously had a hand in it, making a conscious effort, turning in corner, and Charles throwing it down, and not Carlos, Sergio taking that tire to line. But do you think that, if I'm thinking of the incident you're talking about, but it was the one with the 4 cars?
Yeah, it was on the second restart. We had the second restart, of course, with Leclerc and Perez. And then, of course, we had the incident later on in the race with Perez, Hamilton and Charles Leclerc, where Perez, obviously at Club and Vale, obviously cut the corner a little bit, which forced Leclerc wide. And Lewis Hamilton brilliantly took the opportunity to pass the two of them. That one, for me, felt a bit more naughty from Checo by cutting. I know it was a bit tight with Leclerc, but I think he should have backed out a little bit. Instead, he just went in, perhaps a little bit angry about what happened earlier in the race, and thought, no, I'm just not going to back out. And I was surprised that the stewards deemed that one okay. Not that I'm looking to issue penalties, but I thought Checo got away with that one.
Yeah, for me, that was he cut the corner and gained a lasting advantage by keeping the place ahead of Charles. Yeah. Yes, he lost it to Lewis, but he wasn't fighting Lewis going into that corner. He was fighting Charles. So, yeah, so for me, he should have given that place back to Charles. But yeah, that's what obviously the stewards decided that wasn't a penalty.
Yeah, absolutely. And a bit of a strange one. As I said, people saying, oh, he lost out. But I said, yeah, but he lost out to Sir Lewis. It was Leclerc was the one that he got the advantage off of. But as I said, it was really, really fun to watch, to be honest. It was absolutely incredible finish. And the fact that they all managed to finish a race without colliding just is a testament to how good of drivers that they are. And the crowd absolutely loved it. The roar of the fans, especially when Lewis made that move, that was absolutely brilliant stuff to see. But overall, I think despite the incidents that Perez had, the fact that obviously his race was massively compromised by that incident with Leclerc, and of course it kind of adds to the point of how great Leclerc's performance was today. The fact that he was able to, he had the pace to win today, and he was faster than his teammate with a damaged car, the same amount of damage that Perez had apparently, and yet Perez had to take a pit stop, get a new front wing on to recover the performance, and yet Leclerc just did a great job with what he had. So that said, Perez, I think, to get P2 after the start he had, I think he would have been delighted that one. And in a way, he almost had the pace to win the Grand Prix. If he had more laps, he might have been able to catch Sainz.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Sergio did a great recovery drive. Immediately, the safety car helped him because he was before the safety car, he was like 19, 20 seconds behind Lewis at that point in the race before the safety car. So he was completely out of the race winning contention, but yeah, due to that safety car, brought himself right back into it, and he could have, if he dispatched Charles slightly quicker, he could have got Carlos. He was so close to getting that race win.
Yeah, very much so. Let's move on to Mercedes now. Obviously, we talked about George Russell. He was very unfortunate. You could argue penalised even more for his mistake in qualifying, which bogged him down the order a little bit. If he'd have started where he'd have expected to, probably would have been okay. But, these things happen. But Sir Lewis Hamilton, and I said that I thought that he put together the best performance we've seen from him in Canada, that final stint of the race where he started to show a bit of pace, a bit more form that we expect for Sir Lewis, perhaps with that little bit of a carrot dangled at him with Verstappen and Sainz ahead of him to sort of chase after them and build up a gap to his teammate. Today, I think we saw an incredible performance for Sir Lewis Hamilton. The fact that he got out of that car today and felt, and I think rightly so, that he may have had the pace to win today, just shows how well he drove today in front of a home crowd, only getting a podium in the end, lost out to Perez towards the end, could have been P2, but overall, absolutely brilliant performance from Sir Lewis Hamilton. What did you make of Sir Lewis today, Lee?
Yeah, for me, he was the driver of the day, and how, I don't know which the official voted driver of the day was.
I think it was Perez, actually, strangely, but there you go.
But for me, Lewis was my driver of the day, and just how he kept himself in the fight in what is a slower car at the moment, and he's taking it to Red Bull and taking it to Ferrari and coming back, and the constant overtaking and the lap times he get from those old tires when he was still in the mediums. It was the first time this year that over a whole race distance that I would have said you've seen Lewis Hamilton. This year, I don't think we've seen Lewis due to the way the car is set up and the performance, so he hasn't felt comfortable. But this is the first time they're going, this is Lewis Hamilton. He's comfortable in this car. May not be the fastest, but he's now comfortable.
Yeah.
So it's the first time that I can say that this year, and it's he's obviously thoroughly enjoyed his race.
Yeah, I mean, we were expecting Mercedes to be strong this weekend, and I think on a smooth circuit with high-speed corners and straights, the characteristics that suit this Mercedes W13, we were expecting them to be very good. And in front of a home crowd as well, it certainly was going to work out well for Sir Lewis. And just looking at some of the comments, I'm just seeing we've got a Samsung user. I do apologise, we haven't. It's not showing me on the live chat if you've got a tag name like the rest of our lovely lot in the chat. Samsung saying, thank you for calling him by his name. Well, the reality is he's earned his title. He's been a great servant to British sport and also to Britain as a great person. Look, people might have polarising opinions on Sir Lewis Hamilton, but at the end of the day, I think he's done a lot of great things for Formula One and for this country. And he's earned his title. And I think the least that we can do, or a lot of us can do, whether or not he actually cares for that too much, is to pay him the due respect he deserves and call him by his title. But, I digress on that one. So, yeah, as I was saying, a great performance from Sir Lewis. As I said, it just felt a lot more like that there was an opportunity at a win there. And the amazing thing about Sir Lewis, and we've said this about Ayrton, and we said this about Michael and a few others in F1's past, there are very, very few drivers that in a position like Sir Lewis found himself in today, where there is a sniff at a chance of winning. You may not have the best car or the outright pace to win this race, but if you're good enough and just put pressure on those guys in front of a home crowd, you can really extract the absolute best performance. And I'll tell you what, Lee, there are very few things more frightening in F1 than Sir Lewis Hamilton in that mood where he feels like he can chase you down and get the result. And more often than not, how many times does he pull it off? I mean, he did it last year in seemingly unlikely conditions, and he almost did it again this year. So I can totally understand why he's disappointed that he only got P3, but some of the driving today was absolutely superb.
Oh, yeah, it was brilliant. I mean, I would hate to have been in the midpoint of the race. Was he chasing down Charles? Or yeah, he was chasing down Charles once Carlos pitted, and it's like you see the gap go down, and I was like, I would hate to be Charles right now, and the engineer's going, the gap is 2.5 seconds.
He's like, he's coming.
1.9 seconds, 1.5 seconds. And it's like, oh no, Lewis is coming. And that is just, that's just, there's a few drivers on the grid. If they're coming, they're probably gonna get past. It's going to be Lewis, Max, for the first two that come to mind. That if they're chasing you down, they're going to get past.
And it's great encouragement for him, for George as well. Obviously, this was the first time this season that George didn't finish in the top 5. Of course, he probably had the pace to get into the top 5 given what was going on around him. Obviously, he was very unlucky with the start. So hopefully, despite that disappointment, he'll be able to move on because he's been equally brilliant at the start of the season as well. But as I said, great to see Mercedes look like on race pace, they seem to be in the ballpark. Of course, I think if everybody was fine and free from damage, I think Mercedes would have found themselves, 10, 15 seconds off the lead pack at the very, very most. But they were certainly encouraging. And hopefully this will transpire into more great performances as well. Just looking at a comment, Sir Alain de Cadenet, rest in peace. Yeah, I did see that news. Very, very sad news, and thoughts to him and his family at this time. So thanks for bringing that up in the live chat. Let's move on to some of the other stories if we can. And of course, guys, as I was saying, as we talk about these topics, please do let us know your thoughts on this one. Of course, if you've got any questions for us on the show that you want us to answer right now or live as we go along, please do get them in. And it would be, obviously, we'd love to answer some of your questions. So do let us know, obviously, your thoughts on this one, and we'll do the best that we can on this show as we're live, obviously. We're trying to do the best that we can on that. Anyway, look, all that aside, let's move on to some of the other great performances. And Fernando Alonso, bit of a surprise today, but finished P5. And Fernando, it was really interesting because he drove rather well. He was going about his business, doing his thing. And towards the end of the race, we were seeing Perez, Hamilton, and Leclerc. And then out of nowhere, Fernando Alonso pops up in the fight. So P5 for Fernando. I think if you'd have offered him P5, I think he'd have been delighted with that one. Not quite L plan, but pretty good performance from Fernando today, Lee.
Oh yeah, he was. He said yesterday in the qualifying, I think it was his seventh, if I recall, where he qualified. He was like, "This is where the performance of the car is. I wouldn't expect any higher." So if you offered him fifth beginning of the weekend, like, yeah, amazing, take it. And he did. He went and took it and helped himself to fifth. And it just shows you that the wily old fox is still got it.
Yeah, and I mean, that is pretty much it, really. I mean, Ocon was pretty unfortunate. He was running in the points before his reliability issues, of course. I'm sure we'll get more information on that from Alpine in due course. Individual one also saying, if Charles had a chance of winning the World Drivers' Championship this year, Ferrari confirmed they don't think he has a chance. I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure I've seen that quote, but I mean, Charles still has a chance, but Ferrari right now, they're just... As we've already ranted about, if you just joined us, of course, we ranted about this about 15 minutes ago. Ferrari need to be doing more for both of their guys right now. You know, Sainz won the race today, but Charles, as I said, you know, there's been a few races now that he should have got more out of this, and the team have kind of let him down, for lack of a better way of putting it. Anyway, look, I'm not going to go back to that. We're going to talk about some of the other races. Lando Norris for McLaren. P6, not a bad result for him, Lee, but did kind of get a bit caught out by the safety car and that, and he could have been in that fight a little bit more, but he was on the tail of it. But I think overall he probably would have been happy with P6.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's slightly disappointed because until the safety car, he was P5, and obviously he got jumped by Fernando, staying at one lap longer to come into the pits. But he had to pit because if he hadn't pitted, he would have just been swallowed up like Charles. So they missed the opportunity, but at least McLaren realised it and got him in the next lap. But it's still a solid race from him, and he was clear until the safety car was well clear of the rest of the midfield. So it was just a comfortable race. So you can be very pleased with his performance. And it's just solid driver. You take that.
Yeah, I think so too. And he loves doing one at Silverstone. The crowd obviously love Lando. I mean, the merch that he has, I hear, has been flying off the shelves. I think Lando sells more merch at Silverstone than anyone else. And I think that's probably a testament to this new, younger generation of fans coming into the sport. They just relate to someone like Lando. He appeals to them as a person as well as a racing driver, and I totally get it. So, you know, great stuff to see. He's a really great character for F1. He's breathing new life into the sport. And as I said, what we saw some of the scenes today was actually absolutely incredible stuff. So long may that continue. Let's talk about Haas. We kind of wrote them off in our preview, Lee, and yet here we are, me thinking that they've reached their peak, and today, double points for the team. They're starting to look like rock stars again. And Mick Schumacher as well, P8, his first ever World Championship points, and a bit of a tasty battle with Max Verstappen. And despite not coming out the better out of the two, I think he can hold his head up high and say that was pretty impressive. A battle I think their respective fathers would have been very happy to enjoy themselves. What did you make of Haas today?
Well, firstly, Kevin didn't make contact with Lewis, so that was solid improvement for Kevin.
Is that why he got points? He left because Lewis. I think it might have to do with the fact that Lewis was a bit further ahead of K-Mag.
Yeah,
in this
I know.
race today,
I was just making like the situation when Kevin's qualified well. He's in the last few races he's made contact with Sir Lewis. So yeah, it's been solid. But yeah, for the first time this year, Mick actually impressed me, which is nice to see. Obviously, he's been making a few mistakes recently, but yeah, it was a really good fight we had with a wounded Max. So yeah, it was a solid drive from both of them, and I can just imagine. I keep bringing it up when Haas have a terrible race and Gene Haas and Gunther Steiner in a Drive to Survive, but I can actually imagine they're having a good result and Gunther Steiner on the phone to Gene Haas in Drive to Survive, and they're like, "Oh yeah, it was Gunther's rants of how good a race it was and." Max going too far and Mick should have been. But yeah, I'm really pleased for them to get a solid result after the few bad races that they've had.
Yeah, I mean, admittedly, I don't watch Drive to Survive, but I'm almost tempted to watch season 5 when it comes out some point early next year, maybe, just to see the British Grand Prix episode, because I want to see the celebrations in Haas. I think they're probably the happiest team of anybody. Even though Ferrari won today, I think they're probably the happiest team of anybody this afternoon. And fair play to them, because it's these sorts of races where chaos ensues and things get a bit crazy. You have to be there to take the opportunities when they come. And I think fair play to Mick Schumacher. It was by far his best performance. And I'm really glad that he put it together. And even, as I said, he didn't win out that battle with Max Verstappen, but it was still impressive driving from him to, race as hard as fair as possible. And hopefully this inspires him to get more points. And the same with K-Mag as well. So, no, really, really good stuff for Haas. I really like to see them do well. And I'm glad that they're still proving us wrong. Still getting those points. They're now 8th in the Constructors. I think they overtook Aston Martin again. So, no, good stuff from them. But speaking of Aston Martin, 9th and 11th for them today. Vettel 9th, Stroll 11th. Not a bad result for them today, considering that they were practically at the back end of the grid after qualifying. Sebastian Vettel, the envy of so many people. The birthday boy, of course. Happy birthday to you, Seb. And, of course, on his birthday, got to drive his FW14B, the Nigel Mansell 1992 Williams. The envy of everybody driving around with carbon-neutral fuels. Obviously, part of the environmental campaign for F1 in the future. So great stuff to see from him. What did you make from Aston Martin today at their home circuit, given how badly qualifying went? I think Sunday turned out to be rather more prosperous for them, I think, but obviously not quite where they want to be going forward.
Yeah, it turned out better than they probably expected, but it's similar with the Haas. Unfortunately, 6 cars didn't finish the race, so that obviously does help them to move up the grid. But I'm not too sure what happened to Sebastian's race, because he was a bit higher up than 9th, and he fell down the order towards the end after safety car.
Yeah,
I'm not too sure what happened to him.
I might be wrong, but, and guys, correct me if I am wrong on this. I think he had a problem with his pit stop or something like that.
Okay.
There was a few of those today. I mean, Lewis obviously had that problem where he lost about a second or so, which obviously could have been quite critical in the race considering where he came out. So it was a day where mistakes were occurring in the pits as well, and I think Seb got caught up in that. But P9 was still a good result for Aston.
But even before the safety car, he was driving it well. He drove a solid race full stop, but he was a nice third result before the safety car, or would have been. So really, Sebastian was on it, and he made the best of the opportunity that came his way. So really improved for them, and obviously Stroll, the way he kept it out the wall.
Well, I mean, this is the thing with the midfield, isn't it? Because we didn't see much of the midfield today, did we? No. I mean, there were flashes.
I saw nothing.
There was so much. Yeah, there was so much going on at the front. It was literally like following Sainz and Leclerc, like lap after lap after lap. All this checking on Max. Oh, he's having a problem fighting this and that, whatever. We saw Vettel make a good overtake on Max as well when Max was warming his tyres up. So I think the British crowd enjoyed that a little bit, seeing Max lose another place. Look, I'm not going to get into the booing and that, because I think we've already said our pieces on this stuff, and it's ridiculous anyway. But as I said, look, you do you, guys. I think Aston Martin will be happy with the points, but it's one of those where, as you said, Lee, they took advantage of a lot of other people's misfortunes, and they'll hope that despite the upsurge in form that they've had, that this isn't a repeat in other races going forward. So we'll see how that goes. The midfield is so tightly packed, really. It could be literally anybody's day from one race to the next. One person whose day it wasn't, or weekend, was Daniel Ricciardo. And I'll be honest with you, Lee, I think the most impressive driving that we saw from Daniel Ricciardo this weekend was the fact that he avoided a collision in that first start. And, not to joke about it, but he was nowhere this weekend. What was going on with Danny Rick?
I have no idea. I was wondering that through the race Lando was steaming along, and just Daniel just can't get a hold of this car. He seemed to make improvements in the last few races, but then he's dropped off, and it's just, obviously McLaren obviously had more data, but they must be running the same thing of what can they do to get Daniel at least closer to Lando. It's mind-boggling before he joined McLaren of the caliber of the driver that Daniel probably still is, but he just can't get to one with this car. And it's really frustrating as a fan to see him struggle so much.
Yeah, I think so too. And I just hope that this is just one of those days we just had a bad weekend. And you just put it, because it's a track where you'd think that, in its high-speed nature, it does require a good element of skill to find that rhythm. And Danny Rick, in the past, has been quite decent around here. Then he has won in Silverstone. I'm sure he's won a British Grand Prix a few years back when he was at Red Bull. I can't remember.
I can't remember.
No, let us know in the chat, guys, if you know. Actually, I might do a quick Google search on this one.
Do a quick Google search.
Whilst I do that, I'm going to have a look at this as well, just looking at the chat. Saying Jojo Gaming saying Stroll is the worst driver on the grid, nothing on Gotifi, and I mean, Well, I mean, he's certainly in the bottom two at the moment. I mean, Stroll's not exactly the most popular character, but yeah, it wasn't his best today. But then, sometimes you've got to keep it clean. Let me see. Sorry, guys. This terrible podcaster from me here. I'm just having a look on social media. But Lee, whilst I'm doing that, what did you make of... oh, it's terrible. Sorry, I've got the wrong thing here, guys. I do apologise. What did you make of the AlphaTauri incident? Tsunoda and Gasly, because those guys were running relatively okay, and then Tsunoda snatching a break into turn 3 and taking out his teammate. I mean, that's not going to go down well in the AlphaTauri garage, is it?
No, it's not going to go down well at all, especially where they were running at the time when that incident happened. But for some point of the race, I thought that's what was going to happen between Carlos and Charles, where regarding how they were fighting. It's like, I know I'm getting off the AlphaTauri, but just because of the teammates collected each other, I really thought that was going to happen to Ferrari, but obviously glad it didn't. But with AlphaTauri, yeah, it's just maybe the environment in there is creating a bit of a pressure cooker environment between the two drivers, where Pierre's been on the back foot against Yuki. Yeah, it's a bit hard to say because they're being pretty clean drivers, especially Pierre. But it's just where they collected. Obviously, Yuki made locked up, but yeah, it's not going to go down well in the Red Bull camp.
No, and they have been driving very well. Like Yuki's been doing really good. Obviously, him and Gasly seem to be joined at the hip as far as teammates concerned. A lot of people have obviously made jokes about their relationship being a bit more platonic than professional in that regard. But there we go. It's all good and fun. But yeah, I don't think he'd have been the most popular person in the AlphaTauri motorhome after this weekend, after that incident. So it kind of ruined both of their races, unfortunately, for them. So it was a shame. Just looking in the chat, Shiro's got our back covered on this one, Lee. Says 2 third-place podiums for Danny Rick at Silverstone, but no wins. For some reason, I keep thinking that Danny Rick has won at Silverstone. I don't know. It might have been in a junior race. I'm sure he's won in junior races at Silverstone. So maybe that's what I'm thinking of. But anyway,
thank you, Shiro.
Yeah, that's it. But thank you, Shiro, for that one. 1892 Reds podcast asking us, Adam, what would you rather wear, Latifi pajamas or Stroll? Go Tifi pajamas all day, not even a debate. But speaking of Go Tifi, only P12, which no points despite his incredible qualifying effort and the fact that he made 2 places off the start, albeit that was because of Russell and Joe colliding with each other. That said, he still made some overtakes off the start. But Go Tifi, finishing P12, now allows him to no longer be bottom of the Drivers' Championship league. He's now overtaken Nico Hülkenberg, and he's now 20th, despite the fact that Hülkenberg has had 2 races that he joined in to replace Vettel. I believe it was Bahrain and Jeddah. So make of that what you will, but Go Tifi off the bottom of the pile, Lee. Again, we didn't get to see too much of him today. He avoided the big crash at the start, but yeah, I mean, P12, I suppose, I can't complain too much. And unfortunately, because of what happened to Albon, we didn't really get to see how good that Williams was going to be this weekend, because it did look promising.
Yeah, it looked very promising, and unfortunately, it hasn't helped Williams either. Seeing how actually in a live racing dry race, because obviously they sort of from wet quali, but they didn't. They really want the dry data, and they didn't get it. So yeah, obviously, it's going to hurt Williams, and especially now they obviously have to build all the new parts. So I wouldn't be surprised if Nicholas has to wait a bit longer for his parts on the car, because they have to rebuild the parts for Alex. But yeah, it was. I think for Nicholas, he obviously be pleased to be off the bottom, but I think he'd be a bit annoyed that he didn't bring any points home, considering where he managed to qualify.
Yeah, pretty much so. And but it is what it is. It will be a nice little confidence booster for him. I know his future right now is very much up in the air, and I think a lot of people believe that he's going to be very much replaced by Oscar Piastri next season in Williams. It's nice to see him have a good weekend. So no, good to see from him. Valtteri Bottas. Obviously, we talked about Guan Yu Zhou. Terrible weekend for Alfa Romeo. Very unfortunate. Not sure what happened to Bottas, Lee. It says he retired, but I think I can't tell you what happened to him. This is how crazy the race was. We didn't really see much of the midfield. So unless anyone knows what happened to Bottas, it says he didn't finish the race. So I think it was mechanical issues. I'm just reading up on Twitter now. I think motorsport.com said he had mechanical issues according to them. But the funniest thing I saw this weekend was Sam Ryder. the British artist that sang at Eurovision, famously sang the national anthem. And I'll tell you what, a lot of people saying on social media, like, why is Bottas singing the national anthem? I mean, I kid you not, guys. Honestly, if you haven't seen it, obviously Sam Ryder singing the British national anthem, very interesting version of it. It was a bit like Jimi Hendrix all those years ago at Woodstock when he did the American national anthem on the guitar. It was really, really cool. But a lot of people saying he looked like Valtteri Bottas. And if you cover Sam Ryder's hair and just look at the face, I can see what they're talking about.
Yeah, I mean, I could see what they're talking about on that. But yeah, it's just a shame that Valtteri's good performance this season has not replicated this weekend. Maybe he needs a nice skinny dip in the rain that he didn't do yesterday when it rained. No, that picture he took in the river.
Yeah. Shiro's just saying in the comments, I didn't see what the specific issue was, but he pitted and retired. I think that's what it was. I don't really remember. I do apologise. There was so much going on, and I can't remember them showing it on the broadcast. I just remember looking up.
They showed him retiring the car.
Right. I wasn't paying attention
specify.
then. Fair enough. David Dotty in the comments saying, hi, gentlemen. Did you enjoy the race? Hi, David. Big supporter of the show. Thank you so much for joining tonight. Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed the race. It was a fantastic race to watch. As a fan, as a Ferrari fan, as loads of you that follow this podcast will know that I am, as much as I do try to remain impartial, I tend to criticise Ferrari more than most, actually. Yeah, obviously I can't be disappointed at a Ferrari win. I was just disappointed in the fact that given Leclerc needed the result for the championship, I think Ferrari really dropped the ball on him, and I think he has every right to be angry about it, but we'll just have to wait and see. It is encouraging for Ferrari. At least they got that hoodoo off their back, if you like, and got that result, although granted it was a bit of a fortune for them at Red Bull's expense. You've got to capitalise on those things. But yeah, it was a really good race. Did you enjoy the race, Lee?
Oh, I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was yeah, I could go on at least how much I've enjoyed it, but yeah, just in simple terms, it was just really enjoyable through and through. Yeah. Just unfortunately had to wait an hour after the restart.
That's it, yeah.
After the incident for the second start. That's the only, for me, the downside, but obviously the main thing was the safety and obviously no harm to the drivers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I think the takeaway is everyone's okay. What happened after? I mean, it was an absolute crazy race, definitely up there with race of the season so far. I think a lot of us will agree. So I don't think we can be disappointed with that. And of course, we've got a maiden winner. So absolutely nothing wrong in that. Certainly ticking all the boxes. I'm really looking forward to the really 3D video because obviously, for those of you that follow that YouTube, in particular the Spanish YouTuber that makes parody videos with 3D art, and obviously the podium's always Fernando, Magic Alonso, Sainz and Checo Perez, and of course he's got two of them on the podium, so he might have to politely bump Lewis off and chuck Fernando in P1 as always and bump. We'll see what he does. It'll be quite interesting. But anyway, look, I digress, guys. I think that's pretty much all that we need to say, Lee. I mean, going into the Austrian Grand Prix next week, another smooth surface, another track where Mercedes may be strong. Ferrari and Red Bull obviously going to be the favourites there as well. Red Bull will look for redemption on the company's home circuit. Are you expecting them to be back? Should they be worried about the reliability issues that Max suffered?
Well, I think the big question for me is it's the first high altitude circuit of the season. So what strain does that put on engines that like to fail? Ferrari.
Yeah, that's what I'm worried about. I was worried you wouldn't mention that, but yeah, it is what it is with that one. I think Red Bull will fancy that one at home. Their car tends to perform well in high altitudes, but we'll see how it affects these new cars as well. And of course, the old technical directives debate that are going on right now over in porpoising and flexi floors, which of course we'll talk about in our next episode. But guys, thank you so much for tuning in with us and obviously weighing in with your comments and questions as well. We really do appreciate that. We are getting to grips with this live stream thing. I hope it ran okay for you guys. I know there was a bit of a technical issue on my part at the start, and I do apologise that for those of you that aren't gifted with the ability to lip read. But nonetheless, of course, we'll be back in the week with a preview for the Austrian Grand Prix of our regular DNF1 panel and maybe a special guest as well. And of course, we've got sprint qualifying on Friday afternoon. Don't forget, we've got a sprint race in Austria, our second one of the season. So we'll be back for the live watch along and qualifying on Friday afternoon. That's 4 p.m. UK time. And of course, we'll be back with another race review next week as well. But until then, guys, and forget to plug one more thing. Obviously, if you have enjoyed this, I'm terrible at this going live. This is why we edit these, obviously, because it's a bit of a kerfuffle half the time, and I will get better, I promise. But bear with me, guys. I appreciate
Practice makes perfect.
Exactly. I appreciate your support with this one. I'm obviously not media trained. But anyway, look, guys, if you have enjoyed this, do consider leaving a like if we think we've been professional enough. And subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Of course, we really appreciate your support. I'm seeing a lot of you guys in the live video right now, which is fantastic. I'm really, really looking forward to seeing more of you in upcoming episodes. But until next time, guys, please stay safe. Thanks for tuning in. And we'll see you in the next episode of the DNF1 F1 podcast. And remember, if you're not first, you're probably DNF1. Thanks for watching.
Goodbye.